first tutorial is going to be on how to create an image in the style of Chris Nicholls, where we invert and kind of convert some of your images. So the first thing you're going to need to do is select your photograph, the one that you want to edit, and you will open it up into Photoshop, whether you go to File, Open and locate your files that way, or you can easily just click and drag and it will open it up. Now you should notice that at the top here the image is titled. It also is labelled as being a JPEG. We need to save it as a Photoshop file so that we can work in layers. A JPEG flattens your image entirely, but we want to have those layers that we can manipulate, and if we want to make any changes at a later date, we can always go back and do that as well. So the first thing you're going to do is File, Save As. A little dialog box should appear. You can determine where it is that you want to save your image. I'm going to title my image Manipulation 1. And then I want to go to Format. This is a really important part. I'm going to Format and you will click on Photoshop. So you're not going to do Photoshop PDF or RAW. It is either Photoshop, just as you see it here, highlighted in blue, or Photoshop PSD. So that's really important that you make sure that you have selected the correct one. So I've titled it, I have saved it in the same location where my shoot is going to be. You may wish to have a folder just purely for manipulations, as long as you have some kind of system of storing your photographs, then it's up to you how you do so. So once I've done that, I will do save, and then as I am working, I'm just going to keep pressing either Control and S or Command and S, or I can go to File and Save. This just keeps saving your work as you go, so that if the unforeseeable happens where your laptop dies or Photoshop crashes, you will always have the file that you have worked on, the last kind of file that you have saved. So it's good to get into those habits. So I have my original image as it is, and I do not want to touch it at all. So what I'm then going to do is I'm going to duplicate this image. You should be able to see on the right hand side your layers window here. If you can't happen to see that, if it's not visible on your screen, all you need to do is go to Window, and then you can make sure that layers is ticked. Another great one to make sure that you have ticked, which we will need in this case, is going to be adjustments. So make sure that that is ticked as well, and you should find that just above your layers. It should be there. So I want to duplicate this layer. I'm going to click and drag it down to where you see this little box with a plus in the middle, and it will duplicate it. So you can see I've now went from background to background copy. I'm going to rename this so it makes kind of sense in my head. You don't have to do this step, it's entirely up to you. I am going to call it Invert. This is the one that I am going to edit and invert, so I know not to touch my original background. So I can make this invisible by clicking the little eye. I can have my background visible, or invert. Whatever one is light grey, or it might be highlighted in blue depending on your Photoshop version, that is the layer that you are working on. So make sure that you're always selected the correct area. Now, depending on if you want to work in colour or black and white, you can move through a few different steps. So I'm going to show you both ways of doing it. Again, it depends on the look that you're going for. You might even want to have both evidenced in your book to show that you have considered all options. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this invert layer and have one invert, and then I'm going to have one invert in black and white. So I'm just going to call that BW. So now I have the invert, and I have invert black and white. So at the minute, the only layer I have visible, as you can see here, is my invert layer. This is the one that I'm going to keep in colour, but I am going to invert. Two different ways that you can do this. You can press Command and I, and it will invert it for you, or Control and I if you're on Windows, or I can go to Image, Adjustments, and then I can find Invert. So again, either way does exactly the same job. So you can see that it's picked up certain colours, really highlighted areas, and made it a lot more extreme. So I have that there and available to me if I wish. I am then going to make my background visible and any area that I want to cut out. So if we look at Chris Nicholls, he has cut out a section that typically has the most detail in it. So if you're doing portraiture, you perhaps want to highlight the eye area or a section of the face somewhere with a lot of detail. On the left hand side, you will see that we have the move tool at the top. following on from that, we have the marquee tool, which if we click and hold that down, we have various options. So I can go for the rectangular tool. So again, I can determine the size, the shape, the position. I can go for the elliptical tool. So again, you can decide on the shape and the location. If you would like to have a custom shape with the lasso tool on its own, you can have these where they are quite organic and you can determine how you draw them. You can see obviously it has this little kind of dotted edge all the way around. That is the area that we can cut out. Or perhaps you want to, say for example, if I have a portrait and I am looking to have really geometric shapes, I would go to the second lasso down and it gives me nice straight lines. So again, you can decide on the shape. Once you have the area selected that you want to remove, you want to cut out, again, a few different ways you can do it. Either edit, cut, or as you can see here, we have all the shortcuts, so you can do Command and X and it will cut it out for you. So I can now see, if I take away this layer, I can now see that this section here has been removed from my invert layer. And if I make my background visible, I can then see what is remaining underneath. So again, it's entirely up to you how you put these two together. So that is if you want to have it in colour, that is how it looks. If I then go to my invert black and white, the way in which I'm going to do, so again, I just want this layer visible while I'm working on it. The way in which I'm going to convert it is by having this adjustment box here. The middle row, kind of almost in the middle, a little half grey, half white box, click on that and it will change your image to black and white. From there, what you can then do is, depending on the properties, so depending on what colours you have in here, so for example, I have a bright red coat. If I lighten it, it's going to get really quite bright. If I darken it, it's going to get really dark. It's picking out that red. Again, that is entirely up to you where you want to go with that. Over and above that, you can also then change the brightness and contrast. So I want it to be a bit brighter, but I perhaps want more of a contrast. These can be changed depending on the look that you want to go for. Now, what will happen if I select my invert black and white layer and I cut out a section? It's going to show me both my invert and my background as black and white, which is not what we want. So we need to flatten these images. We need to merge all of these together. So I'm merging my adjustments to my invert black and white layer, if that makes sense. So in order to do that, we can go to layer and we will go to merge visible. So again, it's really important that any layers you want to merge, they are not visible. So anyone's with the eye, that's what it's going to merge. Anyone's without, they are going to remain on their own. So again, it's layer, merge visible, and what you should see on the right hand side is that all of those layers condense. And then I have invert black and white. So I can see I have my background, and then I have my black and white, and exactly the same as before, depending on the area or the shape that you want to go for. I can select it, I can edit cut or Command X, and it cuts that section out, cuts that out entirely. So again, any areas that you want to highlight in colour or black and white. You can also do vice versa, so if you want the majority of your image to be colour but your selection to be black and white, your cut out area, what you'll need to do is move your black and white below that layer. So you can imagine you're working in layers of paper, layers of tracing paper. That's a good way to visualise it. So I need to unlock this layer, because if I try and drag this down, it's not going to go. I need to double click, and then all I'm going to do is hit OK, and you should see that my little lock disappears. So it then means that I can drag underneath, and what pops up is my colour. Again, if I then want to select an area, I can cut this out, and what should appear underneath is this image in black and white. So again, I can do Command X, and you'll be able to see you have that black and white. From there, being able to see your cutout and your colour, your black and white, you can then make adjustments on top of that. Just make sure that you have the correct layer selected.